that we face is the world building itself in or making inroads into our lives and letting us become comfortable with the world and things around us, and we start to say it's okay, no harm, no foul, no one knows but me type scenarios. Some of the lessons that have been brought to us over the past several weeks: trials and temptations, worldly preference. That's one that really kind of stuck with me on that. Worldly faith as well, worldly divisiveness. But as I mentioned a while ago, our lesson this evening is going to be talking about boasting from our empty worldly wealth. I want to kind of start off with a little bit of a story. Some of you probably have heard the story in the past. Some people have told it as a joke. It can be used as a joke, but to me it kind of sums up the world that we live in. The story tends to go like this: is that there's four friends, four friends that grew up together, went to school together. They made it a habit of meeting quite often. These four friends are sitting down for a lunch. One of them is a very wealthy man. He owns a lot of businesses, has a lot of investments in this town. The town, everybody kind of knows each other. It's kind of like Corsicana. You kind of tend to know each other in everybody's business at points in times. Another friend of his was one of these, I call them health nuts. They like to run around, lift weights, things like that. Personal trainer type scenario. One was an attorney, and one was a dentist. If you can't catch on, I'm kind of hitting on some people in here as some topics as well. Lo and behold, the man who had all the money was told his friends that he was sick and that he was dying. And he said he wanted to help them out under one condition. He would give each and every one of them $500,000, but the one condition was that once they used it for their business, the day he died, they had to bring the money back and put it in his casket because he wanted to take it with him. Lo and behold, the man passes away. Everybody in town was at the service. At the end of the service, everybody left but the three friends. The one who had the gym and the workout equipment, he comes up with a big tote bag. He places it there in the casket. And he steps back and he says, I'm ashamed to say that there's only $300,000 in that tote bag. The dentist walks up, he puts a bag up there as well. He steps back, and I'm afraid to say as well, he said, I couldn't make all the money back. We had to have more equipment, things like that, and dental equipment's not very, very cheap. So there's only $200,000 in that bag. Well, the attorney walks up, brings an envelope out of his pocket. He puts it in the casket. And they all look at him like, what are you doing? He said, that's the $500,000. And if the check clears the bank, then we're all in trouble. The premise behind that is that that's kind of the way that we are sometimes, is that we want to take everything with us. Good, bad, or indifferent. There's things that I would want to keep forever, things like my family and things like that. But a lot of people want to take monetary values and they want to keep it. Kind of a hoarder, so to speak, and things like that. Part of our title deals on boasting, and boasting seems to be what society is best at, boasting or bragging. At some point in time, no matter what age group that you are in here, you have boasted about how good you are at something, how good your kids are, and grandparents, how good your grandkids are at things that they do. You brag that you can do a job better than somebody else. And boasting isn't always wrong, but a lot of times it can be. One of the ways that boasting can always be wrong is found in Jeremiah chapter 9, 23 and 24. It says, thus says the Lord, let not the wise man boast in his wisdom, Let not the mighty man boast in his might. Let not the rich man boast in his riches. But let him who boasts boast in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord who practices steadfast love, justice, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, declares the Lord. It's fine to boast when we realize that who's in control? It's not us. The one who's in control is God, and he set forth a plan, and we have to lean on him in that. Sometimes we don't boast in words, and a lot of times the way we boast is more with our actions. And in James chapter 4 and starting in verse 13, we're going to see where these actions kind of come in play at different times. Sometimes actions will speak louder than words. I've always been told since I was little was that be careful of what you say, because you might be the only Bible that somebody reads. A lot of times people won't listen to us when we talk to them, but they'd rather watch us and how we interact and the things that we do. When I started looking at this lesson, in my mind, I look at things of they're either black or white, A, B, or C. And I told Rusty, and we talked about it, I tried to divide chapter 4 from chapter 5 as best as I could. And the more I looked at it, I realized I couldn't do it. They go hand in hand. If you would turn to James chapter 4, we're going to start reading in verse 13. Verse 13, James says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is to sin." In chapter 5, and pay attention to the picture that's painted here, it says, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned, you have murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you." The last part, chapter 5, pretty much paints a pretty gruesome picture, doesn't it? Something that's not very appealing to read and to look at. And we'll get back to that in just a few moments. But the first topic I wanted to talk about is boasting in our arrogance about the future. You know, we believe that we have all the time that we need. The truth of the matter is we don't have that much time at all. You know, it's mentioned here that your life is like a mist. It appears for a little while. If I was to take a poll of all the different age groups that are in here, from the junior high and high school age, middle-aged, to the older members here, and I was to ask you how fast a week or a month or even a year goes by, I would get different answers. The teenagers would tell me, It goes by real slow. One of the key phrases that stuck with me this past week was from Emily, and I said, "How was school?" And she said, "It's jail." First day, it was jail. That kind of translated to me is that it's drug on, it drug out. If you were to ask one my age how fast time was, depends on what the topic is. Days go by pretty quick. During the weeks, some are faster than other ones. It seems like the months can turn around. It's the first of one month, and turn again. It's the first of the next month. If you mention my kids, 20 years went by quick. That's just a fact of life. If I ask the older generations, and I'm not going to pick on anybody, you can discern who you are in the older generation, that's your own. You'd probably tell me, or my generation, or the younger kids, hold on, you hadn't seen anything yet. Time goes by in a hurry. In verse 14 of chapter 4, it says, "What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes." Life is fragile. Life is not a guarantee. Proverbs 27:1 tells us, it says, "Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what the day may bring." You know, a lot of times we make comments about next week or next month or next year. We don't know what the next 10 minutes is going to bring any of us. Okay, on that. Verse 15 says, "Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that." 1 Corinthians 1, chapter 31 says, "Therefore it is written, let no one boast in the Lord." The Lord wills. If it's His will, we're going to be able to do this. Another thing I've always heard, if the Lord wills and the creek doesn't rise. I know you probably heard that one as well. Okay? It's not up to us to what's going to happen tomorrow, next day, next week, next year. We can plan some things. We can't plan everything. We need to realize, like James was telling them, as I mentioned a while ago, we're not in control of everything in our day. We can control things like when we eat, when we go mow the yard, or when we leave to go to work, or we come home from work, or things like that. What we cannot control, some things, are accidents that happen. People get sick, or a number of things that happens. No one chooses to get a disease. No one really chooses to have an accident. No one chooses to lose their homes. Some of these things happen because they happen. Okay? It doesn't take much to realize that no matter what your age are, from the youngest to the oldest, bad things happen in life that we can't control. All you have to do is look at the announcement sheets, or the screens behind me now, and you see the names come across, people who have infirmities, who are going for treatments, going for procedures, those who are in nursing facilities. They didn't pick to be in that condition. It's just some things that happen, and we can't control some of those things sometimes. Verse 16 says, "You boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil." You know, whenever we boast and we think we're in control, what are we doing? We're pushing God aside. We're kind of telling Him or telling other people that we have this or we control this. The next thing I want to discuss, just real quick, is our desire to accumulate all that we can. The first half of verse 13 in chapter 4 says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and make a profit." James is talking to Christians, businessmen, leaders in the community, those who have important roles, so to speak, or those who have the attention of those around them. They kind of set the example. of what the community does. It was a commonplace at that point in time, but your importance and how you were judged by your possessions, what your monetary possession was, what your household was, how much land that you owned, items like that. Money was power, and the desire for that power or importance was infectious. Not much has changed over that time frame, from then to today. The only difference is that it's a little bit easier to get things that we don't necessarily need all the time. Sometimes, people look at what kind of homes you have, or cars you have, the property you have, the clothes you wear, the people you run around with, the hobbies that you have. And that's how they judge your importance. And what we do is we want to do more and more that we can so we can be more and more important to those around us. If you would turn to Luke chapter 12. And this was mentioned last week as well, real briefly. Luke chapter 12, and starting in verse 13. It says, someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. You see, we already have a problem with money. It's one from the other one. You can divide the inheritance. But he said to him, Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you? And he said to them, Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist on the abundance of his possessions. That's a problem that we have understanding. Our life does not consist of what we have. Our life consists of what we're striving for, not what's here on this earth. And he told them a parable saying, The land of the rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. That's something that, people in our society tend to strive for. As I mentioned earlier, the more things that we can have. Bigger, better. Last week it was mentioned, and Anthony mentioned this past Sunday as well, having money or having wealth isn't necessarily evil. It's not necessarily bad. However, when it controls your lives, your decision-making, then we have an issue. No amount of money can save your soul. I don't care who you are, you can't write a check big enough to save your soul. In Exodus chapter 20 and verse 3, you shall have no other gods before me. Putting anything before God, our focus is shifted. Mark 10 verses 25 says, It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. People often lose their focus from what is important. We get wrapped up in this world of, keeping up with the Joneses. I wasn't aimed at nobody in particular. I'm a Jones on one side. But that's kind of the world that we live in. We have to keep up with somebody else. Always wanting more. And when we do, we start to make compromises. When we make compromises, then we start to give in to the world. The next item I want to discuss is what we have needs to be used. I mentioned a while ago in chapter 5, verses 1 through 6, the picture that was painted was not a very good picture. To me, it resembled death, is what it resembled. If you have the picture in your mind and you start reading through there, and you can vividly see just things decaying over time, going away, rusting away. I'm going to read chapters 5, 1 through 6 one more time, just real quick. And just hit a few high points here. He says, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. The garments have rotted away, they're moth-eaten. Your gold and your silver have corroded, and the corrosion will be the evidence against you. It will eat your flesh like fire. You've laid up treasure in the last days." And then it talks about the ones who they kind of got their wealth from. They kind of rode their back, so to speak. And it says, "The wages of your laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter." And this was one verse that I read over a couple of times and had to think about it. "You have condemned, you have murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you." Just like the early Christians, we need to realize that we have a gift. Everything that we have is a gift, or it's a blessing. It's not something we do on our own. God provides. James chapter 1, verse 17 says, "Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above." It's not something that we make here. It's given to us. So many times the blessings we receive, we tend to keep. We tend to store them up, hide them, accumulate them to look at. And some people will do that with money. They'll do it with property. They'll do it with vehicles, car collections. Now, I know some people who have some unbelievable cars, spent lots of money on them, and don't ever take them outside. They stay inside. Nothing wrong with that, as long as that doesn't rule your life, so to speak. But a lot of times we don't have the capability to avoid that from ruling our life. We need to look at ourselves and our situation and make sure that we're giving back to those who have helped us get to where we're at. If you're an employer and you don't take care of your employees, you're taking advantage of them. If I'm a person who has means to take care of somebody who is in need and I don't, I'm taking advantage of them, or I'm keeping them down. We have that responsibility to take care of others with what we've been blessed with. In Luke chapter 21, verses 1 through 4, it talks about the widow woman. And it talks about the widow woman and giving, and those who had the money, who had the rich people, who had the capability, they gave a portion. But the widow woman gave 2 copper coins. She gave all she had. And the comment was made was that she gave out of her poverty. See, sometimes that we look at things like that, and we give, sometimes we give begrudgingly, because we have something else that we want to do. But part of the church is, and part of our responsibility as Christians is that when we give those funds, as I mentioned earlier, it's not a problem to have money. I'm not going to dwell on it about giving money to the church or up in contribution, but you have that responsibility to do what you can, because those funds are used to sustain the work here at Westhill, and they're used to help those who are struggling. Another verse I want to read, if you'll turn to Matthew chapter 25. Matthew 25:31 through 46. And to me, this one was a pretty close comparison to chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. It says, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another, as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. And then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food, and I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me.' Then the righteous will answer him, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?' And the king will answer them, 'Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of these, the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me.'" Then it goes on and says, "Then he will say to those on his left, 'Depart from me, cursed into eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food, and I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me.' Then they will also will answer, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister to you?' Then he will answer them, saying, 'Truly I say to you, as you do not do it to one of the least of these, you do not do it to me.' And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteousness into eternal life." This is a sober warning for all of us. For those of us who, and I'm not saying we do it all the time, but at some point in time we do tend to boast about some things. Things that we have, vacations that we go on, the luxuries that we can afford, and things like that. But these verses kind of draw parallels to me. One of them I will look at is James chapter 5 and 1. It says, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl, for the miseries are coming upon you." In Matthew 25 and 46, it says, "And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." The comparison in chapter 5 about the money and the clothes and the corrosion of the coins and things like that, it's items not being used properly. It's blessings that we have. It's things that are stored up that we just look at like trinkets or like trophies. And over time, they corrode and fall away. In Matthew chapter 25, he talks about feeding those who are hungry, giving drink to those who are thirsty, clothing those who are naked, visiting those who are sick or in prison. It's nothing about having to do with all the time money. Sometimes it's just our talents that we have and the opportunity that we have to meet with somebody, to be that example to somebody they can see. Another one that you look here at, it says, "You have condemned, you have murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you." In Matthew 25 and 42 and 43, it says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me no food, and I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me, naked, and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." They're parallels. They go hand in hand. I'm not saying that because if we don't buy somebody's food that needs something to eat when they come by, that we've killed that person. But we have put a blemish on them, how they look at us as members of the church. However, instead of boasting about how much we have or things that we can do, things we have accumulated, and being arrogant, sometimes where the boasting becomes arrogance over time, we need to do better for other people. And by helping other people, we're going to tend to help ourselves and to understand where we're at. I was hoping that this lesson would cause us to kind of look more at ourselves, look kind of deeper at ourselves, see where we're at. It did me in a lot of ways, just from the simple fact of missed opportunities at times that I didn't pay attention to. But we need to strive to look for ways not to boast about what we have or what we do, but just be a good Christian influence to those around us. And to be that example that people not only can hear, but they can see and they can watch us. In Proverbs chapter 27, verse 2, it says, let another praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips. It doesn't do any good to praise what I have done by myself. It's better that someone else praise me or us for what we do, and we don't even realize it. I want to appreciate you being here this evening. I think we just got about, 3 or 4 minutes to the bell, and then we'll have our announcements in a short devotional. Thank you.